She's not stationary. She's moving. Look at her foot. See over there on the right, her foot is, she's pushing off, she's moving forward.
Oh yes, I see, she's got her foot like that.
Right, yeah, and the flame is actually being pushed back by the wind. If you look at the flame, she's moving forward. And she's looking away from America, she's looking back at Europe. She's looking specifically back at France, but she's also looking at Europe as a whole. The title of the statue is Liberté, Enlightening the World. And when the statue was created, there were almost no republics in Europe at the time. And one of the ideas behind the statue is that she's showing the rest of the world the way to the republic, the way to democracy. And so she's here in America, but she's moved, but she's carrying the message to the rest of the world at this point. This was not an American idea, this was the idea of the French. Up the stairs, because it's really all it does is wear you out. So now this is a torch. This was actually the original, actually I think this was the second flame, actually, the torch. Now the Statue of Liberty, the original idea behind the statue, none of the ideas, was that it was supposed to function as a lighthouse.
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
Right? And Frederick August Bertoldi, the artist who created the statue, he originally wanted the flame to look like it looks today, gilded with gold, and lit with reflected light. But at the time, the Army Corps of Engineers were worried that it might be too bright. They thought it might actually blind the ship's captains. So instead, what they did is then they cut the flame up and they put lights inside and they used this amber like glass. It was never really effective though. It was never bright enough to work as a lighthouse. And this flame, this wasn't watertight. And so water was seeping in and creating a lot of corrosion. So in the 1980s when they did the restoration work on the statue, they replaced the flame with the one that's there today, and the one that's today is like Bertoldi wanted originally, gilded with gold. And as you can see, this used to be an observation deck. You can see the little door right here. This was an observation deck at one time. That ended in 1916.
Well,
they closed the torch in 1916. It hasn't been open. I imagine if like the president of the U.S. you could go up there, but if anybody else, it's not open to the public. But
I would look at it. Sometimes people come to see Mount Rainier and then it's fogged over.
Okay, so that's where we started over there.
Okay.
That's Manhattan. You can see the East River, you see the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and the Williamsburg Bridge there. That's Brooklyn, across from Manhattan. Closer to us here on the right is Governor's Island. It's called Governor's Island because it was originally set aside for the exclusive use of His Majesty's Royal Governors. And then it became a military base after the Revolutionary War, and then in 1960 the U.S. Coast Guard took over. It was the largest Coast Guard station in the world from 1960 to 1996. And then in 96 the Coast Guard left. They eventually sold the island to New York, and we use it as a park. No one has lived on the island since 1996 because up until recently there was no potable water available on Governor's Island. Governor's Island, by the way, was also where the first Dutch settlement was built in 1624 when the settlers arrived here from Holland to create the colony of New Netherlands. They originally stay on that little island for about a year. Then in 1625, they move over to Manhattan. They build the city of New Amsterdam on Manhattan. New Amsterdam then becomes New York when the British take over in 1664. Because what happens is, after World War I, Cass Gilbert, the man who did the Supreme Court building and the Custom House down in Battery Park and the Woolworth building, all these great buildings, he was appalled that America was so badly equipped to send troops and supplies overseas during World War I. And he thought it was a big embarrassment. And so he created the Brooklyn Army Terminal as a place, as a central place to ship stuff overseas if there was ever a need. And that's right over there. If you look across the water, you see those buildings almost look identical. Well, right along the waterfront in front of it, it's hard to make out right now, but there's a long, low building. That's the Brooklyn Army Terminal. And from then on, that's where American troops going overseas would ship out from. And from then on, about 3.5 million American soldiers leave the United States from there. And the very last thing they see as they're going out of the
Statue of
harbor is
Liberty.
the Statue of Liberty. It's the last thing they pass. And so she becomes the symbol of America itself at that point. She's the thing they're all fighting for. So here's an unusual view of her right now, if you look up. Different angles of the statue from here.
Cold over there.
Let's go inside
Over there.
Okay.
and
Talk me into it.
look up the statue's dress, and then we'll take the walk downstairs to the museum. And
Oh my gosh.
and if you look closer, you can actually see the spiral staircase that the lucky 240 people who bought their tickets in advance get to climb up to go into the crown. Here you can see the great big bolts that hold the statue on, right? Anyway, yeah, so the French felt very close to American independence. You know, we signed the Declaration of Independence. It was a piece of paper that said we were divorcing ourselves from the largest empire the world had ever seen. Right? The British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. They had a huge navy and army and everything else. And we had nothing. We had no army. We had no navy. We had a piece of paper that said, we're done with Great Britain. Well, everybody in Europe thought this was a really, really bad idea. This was a threat to the European way of life with all the royal families, monarchs, kings, and empires and everything else. So everybody was like, said to Great Britain, you have to stop this. You have to stop this now. It's got to be over. This is too dangerous an idea. Germany even gave Great Britain troops to help fight the Americans. The French, on the other hand, said, you know what? This is kind of interesting. The French were having their own issues with Great Britain at the time, and so they just watch the stairs. So the French decided to support America. The French gave us naval support. They gave us naval help. They also gave us generals and they gave us armies. I mean, Lafayette, one of the biggest names in America. Almost every town has a Lafayette something because of that. You know, and so the French helped us win the American Revolutionary War, and then the French were inspired to create their own republic. And so they felt very close to America, and so they wanted to help us celebrate the 100th anniversary of the signing of our Declaration of Independence with this magnificent statue. She's a little late for that, though. She doesn't get here until 1884. We'll talk about that when we're downstairs, but she's a little late. So this pedestal that she's on, this was created by Richard Morris Hunt, another great architect in the beginning of the 20th century. They were all part of. They went to most of the architects, American architects at the time, studied in Europe, in Paris. There was this whole idea that civic architecture should evoke the classic architecture of Greek and Roman, you know. And so this is actually kind of a Greek revival with the columns and whatever.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about this pedestal is the medallions that you see on the side of the pedestal. There are 40 of them around the pedestal.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Why do you think
10.
Why do you think there's 40 medallions?
Okay, just a minute.
There were 40 states, yeah, at the time, and each medallion was supposed to have the coat of arms of a different state. But at the last minute, they decided not to put the coat of arms on. A good thing, right? Because
Because we have a few more states. Okay, very good.
yeah,
We're pissed off the other 10.
Yeah.
Were to come later.
right. All those Johnny-come-latelys.
Yeah.
Huh? Hey,
So we went.
so the statue, now she was given to us by the people of France. Not the government of France, the people of France gave us the statue. The French citizens paid for the statue. Come in here, we'll meet some of the people behind the statue, and this man right here, Edouard de Lavallee, and he came up with the idea of creating a monument for American independence as a common work of both nations, meaning from the people of one nation to the people of another, and as a joint effort. Now, one of the reasons why they were talking about this is because France at the time was not a republic. France had been a republic, and then Louis Napoleon Bonaparte threw out the French Constitution because he wasn't allowed to run for re-election. He didn't like that, so he canceled the French Constitution and declared the Second French Empire. And the French were upset by that. They wanted to remind their country that they were supposed to be a republic just like America. The man who creates the statue is this dreamy-looking guy here, Frederick August Bertholdet, a French sculptor whose dream in life, whose passion in life, was to create a giant statue incorporating a source of light. He was fascinated by the ancient world, by things like Colossus and by the lighthouse at Alexandria. And so he always wanted to create a giant statue. Anytime something would happen around the world, Mr. Bertholdet would come up with an idea for a statue to celebrate it. And nobody ever wanted it. The closest he ever got before the Statue of Liberty was the opening of the Suez Canal, when he offered Egypt the idea of a woman welcoming people to the canal. But they didn't want it. Now, according to the History Channel, there's an erroneous story out there that the History Channel perpetrated because of this. The History Channel's story is that the Statue of Liberty was really re-gifted from Egypt to the United States. It's not true. This was never built. This was never built. And it's a very different statue. There's a lot of different, now you can see some similarities, but a lot of different things. First of all, the torch is in the wrong hand. Second of all, the headpiece is different. And the gown is different too. The gown on the Statue of Liberty is very specific, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, Mr. Bertholdet always wanted to create a giant statue, and and then when he met up with Mr. de la Vallée, this idea was born. And this is what our harbor looks like. We have over 100 ships coming in and out of our harbor every single day. It's the biggest harbor in America, the biggest port in America. There's Castle Clinton.
Okay.
There's Governor's Island, Liberty Island, what becomes Ellis Island.
Where's the Hudson River?
And the river's up here. This is the start of the Hudson River here. That's the Verrazano Narrows, where the bridge is down there that we saw when we were upstairs. And that's the other bay leading out to the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay.
So Bertholdet surveys the harbor, and he picks this little island, and he picks it because of its position, because it's looking back at France. The statue, here she is. Here's some versions of the statue. She's now for the image of the statue. They decide they will use the Roman goddess Liberty.
Oh, okay.
Is the model for this, and around her feet there are broken chains. She's breaking free from the tyranny of the past. And in her right hand, she holds the torch of liberty. On her head, she's wearing the crown with 7 points. And that's to symbolize the 7 seas and the 7 continents of the world. The original plan was they were actually originally going to give her a slave cap. Because when slaves were freed, they were given a cap to prove that they were free. But they thought it was too controversial because it was really too close to the Civil War. They started discussing this, the idea of the statue, well before she got here. They were discussing the statue in the 1870s, you know. And then in her left hand, everybody wants to know what that thing is in her left hand, right? Mm-hmm. That thing she holds. The book.
Declaration of Independence.
Right, it says July 4th, 1776 on. Actually, it's in Roman numerals on the on the thing upstairs. But it's a very specific thing, actually. It's not just a tablet. It's not just a symbolic book. Okay, look at each side. Do you see that notch right there? Mm-hmm. That's a keystone. The most important piece of construction when you were building an arch in medieval times. It held everything up. If you didn't have a good keystone, the building would fall, right? Mm-hmm. That is the keystone to the new republic. That's exactly what she's holding on in her left hand. And so here's a couple images of the goddess here. Different images. One is from the French Revolution, which is a little incendiary. See, we know she's a goddess because her top is exposed. That's why we know she's not a real person in that painting. Because back then that was the convention. Today, of course, every time we see a naked body, we want to cover it up. But back then, they understood that this had a symbolic meaning. It was not prurient or anything else. She was symbolizing a goddess, actually. That's what she is there. It's not that she's been in a tough fight or anything, even though she is carrying a musket. Yeah. You know. Oh, and the gown that she's wearing, by the way, is a Greek stela. because Greece was the birthplace of democracy. Now, this portrait here, this is Bertoldi's mother, and according to the legend of the statue, Bertoldi used his mother as the model for the statue's face. And he used his wife as the model for the arms. And he used his mistress as the model for the body.
There you go.
Let's not go there, okay? That's just... This is her foot. This is a full-scale size of her foot, right? You can see how the copper is riveted together, the sheets of copper, right?
Yeah.
You can also feel how thin the copper really is. When you feel, it's not even, actually if you hold 2 pennies together between your fingers, that's actually a little thicker than the actual sheets of copper that make up the statue, you know?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Best sign in the museum. Please do not stand on the foot. Right? Best sign in the museum. So the way he created this statue, this enormous thing, you know, you can see it's in pieces, and it was like a jigsaw puzzle.
To put it together.
To put it together. But the way he created is he started with models. Well, this is a cast of the ear right here. Okay, this used to hang out, I believe, in his dining room, his living room, Bertoldi's living room. But he would create one size of the statue, right? And then they'd take measurements. They'd take up to 4,000 measurements of the piece, and then they would make a larger size from that, right? Based on the measurements they took. And it would grow. And then when they got to the full size, they would create these wooden frames to match the piece, and then they would heat the sheets of copper and hammer them into the wooden frames. Over here there's a picture of the statue in 3 different sizes. We got small, medium, and large over here. And you see the different sizes that they're working on. And so the statue is, you know, as we saw, she's hollow. And she's made out of this thin copper. Now, the original plan for the statue was to actually put the copper on just a stone pillar. This was going to be the plan. And that wasn't really ideal because, well, with wind and stuff, I mean, it would crack, there would be problems. But that problem was solved by this man right here, Alexander Gustave Eiffel. Okay, now he was a French engineer, and we know him from his very famous tower. But this was the first project he created using this remarkable technology. The sheets of copper are attached to ribs, which are then attached to arms to the tower, and so they move. They move just like this. He was inspired to, the thing that gave him this idea was the dress model. Because you've got a central tower, then you've got the arms coming off of it, and the material hangs on it. And this technology that he develops for the Statue of Liberty is the same technology we use today when it comes to building a skyscraper. You have the steel skeleton, and the skin hangs on the outside. So the statue was assembled in pieces, and she was assembled in Paris.
Stainless steel.
So, 1881. Now, they told us they were giving us the statue in 1876. But they didn't 1881, they got the head. They have the arm. The head and the arm are now going to be used for fundraising purposes. People in Paris they can pay to climb up into the head. And the arm is sent here to America. It's sent to an exhibition in Philadelphia, and then comes up and sits in Madison Square Park for almost 10 years. And people can go up there. And so here's the statue. Here's her head. Okay? And you can just see the beginning of Mr. Eiffel's tower.
Yeah.
Right? And then here's another one. And then by 1882, look where we are. Okay? So we're still working on it. There's the arm, and the torch is going to go on the top of the arm. There she is.
Oh, wow, they've made a lot of them.
And 1884, she's all together there in Paris, right? And then, after she's all together in Paris, they take her apart, they pack her into 214 crates, and they ship her here over to America, and we have to put her together ourselves. She's like a giant IKEA project when she gets here with thousands of pieces.
IKEA, yeah.
You know? So here's an interesting look inside the statue. You can see the Mr. Eiffel's work close up. We got a glimpse of this when we looked up the statue's dress. But on the back here you can see exactly what it looks like. And you can even in the model, they've even got the little spiral staircase that goes up into the crown on view in here. And so there's a nice view of the cutaway of that. We're down in the museum now, but we were up there before. Coming out of the ground kind of freaked people out, you know. So the statue gets shipped over to America. Now, America's job, the American public's job on this, the French people have created the statue. The American people are to create the pedestal. And we have to put it back together. We also have to create the pedestal. Richard Morris Hunt designs the pedestal. This is the new Colossus, Emma Lazarus. This poem a lot of us learned in school. When going, or I did, but at my age, won't tell you how old that is. Anyway, Emma Lazarus wrote this poem. Now, she originally turned the request down. She was asked to write this poem while they were doing the fundraising for the statue. And originally she said no. She said she was not interested in writing a poem to a statue. She didn't know what to say. But then she was doing a lot of work with the Eastern European Jewish immigrants that were coming into the country, and she was very moved by their experience. And that inspired her to then write this poem. And this poem, it's very famous, but it's almost forgotten right after that. It's almost forgotten right after that, because she writes the poem, and then it's kind of forgotten. And then in 1904, as more and more immigrants are pouring through the port of New York and they're all passing the Statue of Liberty, somebody remembers the poem, and at that point, it's put on the pedestal of the statue, and it becomes firmly a part of the story of the statue and immigration. But it's a really, really powerful poem. There's a lot of amazing things in this poem if you break it down. First of all, it's called the New Colossus, as opposed to the one from ancient times. But it says, not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles.
All I had in my mind, I was looking at the Statue of Liberty.
From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. The twin cities are New York and Paris, because she's come from Paris to New York. So twin cities frame the harbor. Keep, ancient land, your storied pomp, she cries with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. What a terrible thing to say, right? But that is not what she is saying. That is what she is speaking there, is the attitude that these people's home country had towards them. This is why they were coming to America, because their own home had no use for them. They thought they were the wretched refuse.
One morning,
She says,
as we were coming,
send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
and in Slovak she says,
This used to be outside, now it's been moved inside. It's a very, very powerful poem. Most people remember it as give me your tired, your poor, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's just a couple of lines. She's celebrated in song. She becomes a tremendous symbol for all the immigrants coming to America, and a lot of these shipping lines are using her when they're selling passage to America, New York and Philadelphia. You see the statue in the background. And then she goes even further. She comes into popular culture. Over here, you see different ways. She's used among us. She's a plate. She's a clock. She's a Tiffany lamp. She's a Hanukkah menorah. Over here, and then in the ultimate American story, she becomes an advertising symbol. Over here. She becomes a political commentary as well as advertising symbol. Here's, the story of immigration is always like the people who are here always want to keep the people who are not here yet out,
Right.
Of course.
And here's one, make America a better place, leave the country. She's invited.
Oh, jeez.
And here she's holding her nose, the dregs of Europe coming by her, But then, of course, she also helps us sell things like savings banks. She's an advertiser, dry goods store, radio station, Levi's jeans, the circus.
Apples. Yeah,
Yep.
come on. Washington apples.
So she's the ultimate American success story. She's an advertising symbol.